He is here tonight, our charity founder, Chip St. Clair.
A lot of you may know the story, but for those of you who don't, we're going to tell you why. My mother was a horrible alcoholic. My father was abusive. That's an understatement. He was maniacal. He would get violent if you walked across the vacuum lines in the carpet. One morning, my dad woke up and after breakfast said, "Hey, I have a brilliant idea. Why don't we get in a boat and row all the way across Lake Michigan to the other side?" Well, didn't sound like a good idea to me, if anyone knows how large Lake Michigan is. But my dad was somebody that you don't argue with. And so he insisted I go, and the shoreline was small in the distance. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Chip, why don't you go for a swim?" And then he narrowed his eyes and looked at me and he said, "Are you afraid?" And my voice caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. And he looked at me and he said, "I think you need to face your fears." And that's when my dad picked me up out of the rowboat and threw me out into the water. You know, I remember hitting the ice-cold water and losing my breath, and my head popped up above the surface, and I'm looking around, and there's my dad rowing away. And I cried out, "Dad, please stop the boat." And he waited, and I got within a few feet, and then he started rowing away again. So when I'm floating alone and cold and thinking I was going to die in Lake Michigan, I remembered Invictus. And although I would endure another decade or so of abuse at the hands of my father, there's something I learned that day, that no matter what he would do to me, I had these embers of hope deep down inside, embers we all have, that he could not snuff out no matter what he would do to me. And so what I just described isn't so unusual, dealing with an abusive situation. What makes my story so unusual is what happened on January 22nd, 1998, when I was 22. Well, one thing led to another, and I had a disagreement with my father, and I wanted to be my own man and stand on my own 2 feet and express my opinion, but that didn't work with my dad. He became belligerent, started calling me all sorts of vulgar names in front of Lisa, and I got up to leave. That's when he chased me down and assaulted me and ultimately dislocated my shoulder. And so my dad was taken to jail for domestic violence, and I was taken to the hospital with a dislocated shoulder. So I called my Aunt Chris, who lived in Indiana, my dad's sister. And I said, "Aunt Chris, I'm looking for family support. I want to press charges against Dad. I'm tired of dealing with this. I dealt with this my whole life." And she said, "Chip, there's something I have to tell you. Don't call the police. You can't tell Lisa this. You can't tell anybody this." And of course, being a man of my word, I just waved Lisa over so she could listen in on the phone. And that's when my aunt told me, "Your father's real name is not David St. Clair, as you had always believed. His real name's Michael Dean Grant, and he's a fugitive. He's a child murderer, one of America's most wanted, who escaped 26 years ago from prison in Indiana." I wrestled with what to do. She said, "You have to call the police. You have to find out that you have to know that the police know who he is. You have to turn him in." He said, "Well, when we book somebody, we take fingerprints, but we don't always run them through our system unless we have a reason." And that's when I told him, "You have a reason." And I'll never forget, the detective said, "We have Michael Dean Grant in custody. He's one of Michigan's 10 most wanted." And I was left in the aftermath, trying to pick up the pieces, not knowing anything about my past and knowing even less about my future. In a sense, I was 8 years old again in Lake Michigan, faced with a situation. I can sink or I can swim. And Lisa wanted to take me to the butterfly house at the Detroit Zoo. Now, when I go to the zoo, I want to see the crocodiles. I want to see the lions. I don't want to go see butterflies. What fascinated me most was not the butterflies themselves, but the people watching the butterflies. You know, I saw a little girl, I remember, coming up to one of the butterflies that was trying to get food or nectar out of a flower. And I look over and there's a guy who looked like he hadn't shaved in a month, hadn't taken a shower in a month, the kind of guy you just don't want to make eye contact with. You're like, "Okay, I'm not looking at you." And he has the same expression, looking at this little butterfly going, "Oh, look at the little butterfly. Don't I know you?" And I'm like, "Wait, you broke the rule." And I look up in the mirror and I see this guy, and he starts to describe a show I had been on, and he remembered my story, and he's getting tears in his eyes. He's talking about a situation he had been through as a child that he never told his wife, he never told his kids, he never told anybody. And he's telling me, this perfect stranger. But he said, your story gave me the courage to come out and talk about what I've been through instead of letting it hold me back. And that's when I realized this is something beyond me. This is something so powerful. Think of the purpose of a caterpillar. A caterpillar devours, feeds, consumes, destroys its surroundings. And then it goes into a cocoon or chrysalis, and it morphs into a butterfly. That same creature that devoured and destroyed its surroundings now pollinates, now makes the world a more beautiful place. Flower